Welcome to Pensari Basketball Live, and you are witnessing history because this is probably the first time this live has ever started exactly when it said it would. It is 8:30 p.m. and we're ready to talk some Toronto Raptors. Now, look, if you have been paying attention to the NBA world right now, you're not expecting a lot from the Toronto Raptors. I gotta tell you, I've read projections with 33 wins, 34 wins, 36 wins, and I have been saying all summer since Fred VanVleet left, I expect more from this roster. So today I want to lay out my case for what I think NBA analysts are once again missing about this year's Toronto Raptors. The vibes have been great in Vancouver. If you believe it, what's up? What's up, NBA Jimmy? What's going on, man? The vibes have been great. And I think the roster is a little bit underrated. So today I'm going to lay out my three cases, really a three-pronged argument, which I think is pretty airtight for why I think the Toronto Raptors are a lot better than people think they're going to be, and what to expect from this team going forward. A little bit about last year and what I think actually went wrong. There's been a lot of talk about selfishness, a lot of talk. And I understand that this channel probably deserves a lot of blame, credit for starting that snowball, but I think it's gotten out of control. And I think I want to control what I really meant when I said that the Raptors were playing a selfish brand of basketball last year, and just provide a little bit of context in terms of just who needs to answer for what, whether those people are still here, all that stuff. So let's hit the intro. If you're new around here, please hit subscribe. It really does help this video get out to more people. And as we just let people populate in. Hello, everyone. This is a call-in show, by the way. So in about 20 minutes, we'll take your calls. If you got something to say, let me know. All right. Intro time. Hey, yo. Okay. Look, honestly, with the people who are currently detracting the Toronto Raptors, just saying that the Raptors are heading for a miserable season, I really think y'all are missing the forest from the trees. So, as I said, today I want to lay out my case for what I think is wrong with the argument, right? Specifically. And I want to just take a look at what I think the Raptors can do well, because this is a team that has a considerable advantage, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. I've read a lot of preseason analysts talking about the Toronto Raptors, and the conversation starts with they lost Fred VanVleet. This has been the conversation all summer. They lost Fred VanVleet. You lost a hell of a point guard. He's, a really good player. I want to prod at that a little bit. I do want to prod at that. I want to poke at that. I want to talk about that a little bit, because look, I spent a lot of last season saying he's not as good as the numbers suggest. And I don't want to start today's live on a 20-minute diatribe about why I felt that the numbers were overinflated, but I do want to talk about how last season really played out, in my opinion, and why I think the way last season played out should kind of wipe the slate clean for how you look at this roster going forward. So specifically, if you're an NBA coach or you're a college coach, you got to look at it from this perspective. You look at the roster you have, and unless you are a hardhead, right, or you're a guy who just has to play one way, ideally you're going to construct a system around the roster that you have. You have a young roster, twitchy, switchable roster, that's going to somehow come into your schemes. You have a lot of good shooters, that's going to come into your scheme. Your shooters really like to pop above the break. Okay, that's going to come into your schemes. Oh, you have two of the best corner shooters, that better go into your offensive game plan. This is how every coach that I've ever seen, well, the good ones, this is how they orient their offense. You have a superstar player, okay. Now we have a bit of a difference maker. And now you're going to start tailoring things around that superstar. If you have a Vince Carter in his prime, a Tracy McGrady, a James Harden, someone like that, a LeBron James, well, they are your offense. They are your system. And nothing that you can generate within the context of your offense is going to beat what they can create for themselves. And so, sometimes when you have a player like a Luka Doncic or a Giannis Antetokounmpo, you put the ball in their hands and you say, get out of the way. Makes perfect sense. My big beef last year, was that the Raptors didn't have a superstar, but they decided to tailor their offense around players who weren't superstars. And it seemed like the coaching philosophy was one and the team building philosophy was another. And I think nowhere could this example or perhaps demonstration be clearer than the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings were awful before Mike Brown showed up. One of the worst teams in the NBA, in my opinion. They'd missed the playoffs for 16 straight years. They had two guys that most people would not consider real stars in Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. They had a whole bunch of mismatched pieces. They changed the roster a little bit. They lose Tyrese Halliburton. They bring in Domantas Sabonis. They bring in, Coach Mike Brown, Jordi Fernandez, all the new vibes, like the beam. And it reminds me a lot of what's happening with Darko Rajakovic here. You may not necessarily see the parallels between the two rosters. Certainly the Raptors do not have a guard nearly as dynamic as a De'Aaron Fox. But you have to think about the philosophy of what the Kings did and then map it onto what the Raptors are currently trying to do. I'm going to remove myself from my analyst hat, and I'm just going to pretend for a second of a day last year that I got to coach the Toronto Raptors. I'm walking into the gym, and what am I seeing? I'm seeing long, twitchy, fast athletes, switchable, 1 through 5, 1 through 4. Do you know what a luxury it is to have someone like a Scotty Barnes or someone like an OG Anunoby or someone like a Precious Achiuwa or a Pascal Siakam, much less all 4 of them on the same roster? I feel like a coach who wanted to could have exploited that somehow. Why does 6'9" work? Why does 6'9" everything work? Why are so many teams trying to get bigger? Well, frame it back to the difference between college basketball and NBA, right? I mean, I talked about this on Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, this might be a little bit repetitive for a couple of minutes here, but just let me, I don't assume the audiences overlap entirely. So let me just condense it very quickly. In college, the pace is considerably slower. Granted, you have longer quarters, you have shorter quarters and a longer shot clock. But typically, I think a college game is like 74 points, 76 points per game. Was it 74? And then the NBA is 114. The Raptors were at 112 last year. You cannot account for shot clock, more threes, and longer quarters in the NBA to account for that big a difference in average gap. The difference is skill. Typically, if I were to walk into a gym and see the players that the Raptors had last year, my first thought would be push everything, push the pace, because it's in transition that your cross-matching ability with these big wings, potentially matching up on a 6-foot guard in the post, is going to be most transparent. Add to the fact that you have big playmakers. Now, I don't think OG Anunoby is a gifted or great passer, but he's average, right? He's not bad. He's not a bad passer. I don't care what the numbers say. He's not bad, okay? Pascal Siakam is a very above average wing, big, playmaker. Scotty Barnes is a gifted playmaker. You have so many reasons to play smart and fast. As you play fast, you unlock certain players, but you hurt other players. If you have an older roster, you do have to slow it down a little bit. The Lakers have often played a little bit slower as LeBron's gotten a little bit older. That makes perfect sense. If your roster's a little bit older, you're going to have to crawl the pace a little bit. I get that. But the Raptors were not an old team last year, so why the hell did they play so slow? Simply put, Fred VanVleet. When you play as slow as the Raptors played last year, when you play as inefficiently, when you don't move the ball as often as the Raptors did last year, a lot of holding, whatever, you're going to do certain things for yourself that are good. You're going to limit, turnovers, which is good for the possession battle. You're also going to probably hijack the offense so that the person who's going to take the shot is a little bit more predictable on each possession, because obviously if you're swing and movement, sometimes, a guy that maybe you're not expecting to might get hot and have 35 points. So if you're trying to reverse engineer someone's all-star season, all NBA season, slowing down the pace and kind of crawling the ball movement, playing a lot of isolation basketball, this helps. This is also why I think Carmelo Anthony never won a championship. A lot of playing like that. So I guess for the Raptors now, under a new system with Darko Rajakovic, you're actually not, and you still don't have a superstar. So I get that. Don't worry. I'm not going to go there. I'm not trying to say that Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam can compete with the Damian Lillards and the Giannis Antetokounmpos, Jamal Murrays, and Nikola Jokic's and Devin Booker's and Kevin Durant's. I know they're not on that level, and I get that. I totally get that. But guess what? Neither are De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. What pace and playing quickly, which specifically means going to your advantages, is going to help you do, is going to help you actually push up your advantages and somewhat mask your disadvantages. Your disadvantages are elite efficiency in the half court. Well, this is only really going to show up if you have to play half court offense like half the possessions. But if you're just pushing it down people's necks, I mean, my God, did you watch the Kings offense last year? Suddenly, your shooters are a little bit more open, right? Playing faster is going to help you if you're a faster athlete, which Scotty is, Pascal is, all these guys, the Raptors, these young wings that they have. Precious Achiuwa, I mean, he's a gazelle. Pascal Siakam, these guys are transition monsters. And the idea that you would crawl the pace and then force these guys to sit in corners where they're not a threat, it's a shock to me. So firstly, I just want to, not to dance all over the place, but when people call this offense selfish last year, a lot of teams were, in my opinion, more selfish than the Toronto Raptors. I find it somewhat ironic that the Raptors are the only team that this narrative has now come out about, that they were selfish. You don't think the Houston Rockets were selfish last year? Did you watch the Houston Rockets? They were so selfish. One of the most selfish teams I've ever watched. Watch that team for 20 possessions, and you might pull your eyes out. But why are the Raptors the one team that is having to answer for all these claims of selfishness, especially when the biggest enabler and the biggest culprit of selfishness are gone? Let's move on. So now the narrative is, well, you're definitely going to get worse because Fred VanVleet is a worse player than Dennis Schroeder. That's true. I don't care how many people have messaged me saying it's not that close. It's not that far apart. They're pretty close. They're really not. And I get that. Don't worry. But they're not getting paid anywhere near about the equal money either. But this idea of replacing one player with another player seems to be where the Toronto media has gotten stuck. They can't seem to get past the idea that this one-for-one replacement isn't really what's happening here. I mean, we're not even sure Dennis Schroeder is going to start, much less be the captain of the team, much less be closing out quarters for you, much less be like the leader and like everything that Fred VanVleet was. That's not what Dennis Schroeder is about to become for you. I promise you. No matter how well he relates to Darko, no matter how well he played this summer, he's not coming in to be your de facto number one option the way Fred VanVleet often masqueraded last year. That's not going to happen. It can't happen. It's not his role. What he could be is a very high usage bench player, potentially a fourth or fifth option in the starting lineup. Certainly not what Fred VanVleet was last year, what some of us wished Fred VanVleet would have settled into last year, but that's certainly not what Fred VanVleet was. If Fred VanVleet had played more to his ideal strengths last year and had shot the ball even reasonably close to his, let's say, career averages, which are not great, I think the Raptors probably make the playoffs. I think they're probably pretty competitive. I think they're probably a 47 to 48 win team. Unfortunately, the Raptors got two versions of Fred VanVleet last year. Number one, can't buy a bucket. Number two, can't pass up a shot. So it's really, in both cases, I feel like his influence on the offense in the first case was hurting a lot of people's numbers because he wasn't, making shots, not getting assists. He's cratering your offense in general by not being able to make shots, not really being able to adjust to the quicker pace that the Raptors were trying to play with Scotty and Pascal at the one. Then when you sort of crawl the offense down to his pace, let him play pick and roll with Jakob Poeltl, yeah, his numbers go up. Jakob Poeltl looks like a beast, but then everyone else struggles. In both cases, you are a mediocre team. In both cases, whether he played terribly or whether he played really well, you were mediocre. You removed that influence. And what you really are doing is not replacing Fred VanVleet with Dennis Schroeder, which is where everyone's gotten stuck. Actually, what you're doing is replacing Fred VanVleet with 5 players. It's really a redistribution of his 23-ish percent usage, his 21, 22 shot attempts per 100 possessions. You're redistributing that completely. And ideally, you're compartmentalizing like every single thing that he did, like from the leadership component, okay, the defense, the point of attack stuff, the playmaking, the shooting. Well, someone else is going to take those shots that he was taking. Someone else is going to make the passes and run pick and roll with Jakob Poeltl. And all you need to know for yourself is not that one single player is able to do everything that he was doing, is rather, can you do it by committee? This sounds like a bit of a cop-out, right? But actually, this is the way sports has always worked. You don't actually replace one player. I mean, you want a really good example of this. Look at the Bulls' record after Michael Jordan retired the first time. Just look at it. I mean, granted, they did not win a championship the year after him. They were not a bad team. They were a really good team. So are you suggesting that Michael Jordan was worth like 4 wins? No, of course not. But that's not how it works. There was no one player who was going to replace Michael Jordan. It is by committee. Now I want to talk about something that extends beyond or extends from the original thought, which is really role optimization and system optimization. I think about certain players and I think, what would they have been in a different system? It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because we only saw them in the system they played in. What would Amari Stoudemire have been as a traditional post big as opposed to a run, jump, gun big with a dynamic passer like Steve Nash? We don't know. We don't know. You know, we don't know what Shawn Marion could have been in a different offense. We don't know what Shaq would have been in a different offense. I could speculate, however, that Yao Ming would have struggled in the 7 seconds or less offense. I could imagine. You know, I could suspect these certain things. And today I was looking at, a couple of examples of I was looking through analytics in the past and I was looking at players who struggled within the first 3 years, whether I could look at Stephen Curry or James Harden or Jason Tatum or any one of these, players who maybe had a jump or a bump, somewhere in their first 3 years like Scotty has. And I was wondering if, year 3, if I could look at the numbers from year 1, 2, and 3 and predict what was about to come in year 6. I mean, a really good example of this was Tracy McGrady. Here's some fun fact for you. So Tracy McGrady obviously played his first 3 years with the Toronto Raptors, and then he went to the Orlando Magic. Tracy was a very talented player. Of course, when he went to the Magic with Doc Rivers, he had a really big year. How big? Well, his 3rd year with the Orlando Magic, so that's sort of ascent, and that was the peak of Tracy McGrady in his 3rd year with the Orlando Magic. He posted a 9.3 value over replacement. 9.3. Now, let me just put this into context. Kobe's career high value of a replacement year was 8.0. How did the Raptors' not star player, the guy they didn't deem worthy of being their star player, how did he become so great? Was it just because he was young? Was it there all along? Could you have seen it? Could it have happened in Toronto? Well, I thought about it a lot, and I went back and I watched some of the games that Tracy played in his last year in Toronto, and something dawned on me. Why is my best passer not handling the basketball more? It just dawned on me so quickly. Tracy McGrady was one of the most gifted wing passers probably in NBA history. I think he was really more of a point guard than anything else. This seems like a controversial take for most people. And yet, how often I saw him just kind of cutting without the basketball, and, they put the ball in Vince's hands, they put the ball in Alvin's hands, Muggsy's hands, Doug Christie's hands. But this young, talented playmaker who was like a 6'8" dynamo athletic beast who needed the ball in his hands was often playing without the basketball. So putting the basketball in his hands, like the like the Houston Rockets did with James Harden, like the Orlando Magic did with Tracy McGrady, it unlocked a completely different version of this player. Got me thinking about, Jason Tatum, year 2, huge regression. Year 3, put the ball back in his hands. Suddenly, it's a completely different story. So how much better could a Scotty Barnes be in year 3? I mean, the trajectory does not seem promising. He regressed last year in a lot of analytics, and I totally understand that. But one thing that I think analytics consistently have missed the boat on is role optimization, system optimization. So earlier when I said I walk into the gym, I see the Toronto Raptors roster, I see Scotty Barnes, I see Pascal Siakam, and if it was my job to orient an offense around that roster last year, the roster the system Nick Nurse ran, the offense he ran would be my last choice. So I think that it is fair for Masai Ujiri to have questions about who his roster even is, because I don't think he's seen it. I don't think he's seen it. And so you start thinking about all of the advantages that you could potentially have with this roster going forward. Now let's talk about the three things that I'm really excited about for this team and why I think they're a lot better than people are giving them credit for. So I will agree. I will agree with the major central criticism that if you are comparing Dennis Schroeder to, Fred VanVleet, you definitely got worse. But in a sort of aggregate way, I think you've gotten better. When you take all the small forwards in the NBA last year and you start breaking them down by offensive rebounding, which is a really huge part of winning the possessions battle, and controlling glass and controlling pace and getting out in transition, rebounding is a huge thing in the NBA, of course. Good rebounding team, who wouldn't want to be a good rebounding team? Scotty was, per 40 minutes, the best offensive rebounding small forward in the NBA last year. I think OG was sixth. And I know he didn't make the minutes requirement, but I believe Jalen McDaniels was in the top 10 or top 12 in that regard as well. This is a really good rebounding team. Especially so because right now, as it currently sits, there's a very good chance that Scotty and OG are going to play major backcourt minutes for you next year. Precious Achiuwa and Jakob Poeltl are two of the best rebounders in the NBA. As it stands right now, so is, and by the way, Chris Boucher is not bad either. Those three guys could be your center rotation. Otto Porter. I mean, every single player who's going to play for you this year, with the exception of Dennis Schroeder and Gary Trent Jr., is an above average rebounder for their size. Grady Dick is also a very capable rebounder, defensively and potentially offensively. Not the biggest guy, not the strongest guy, but he has a knack for getting boards. Winning the possession battle is a great thing. Playing with pace, bigger athletes, you have smarter athletes. Playing fast plays right into Scotty's advantages in so many ways. And I think we saw it last year in spurts, right? We saw it in spurts against Atlanta. We saw it in San Antonio. We were like, whoa, Fred VanVleet, never come back. Well, I love this offense. It's flowing beautifully. He seems motivated. He seems strong. He seems in good spirits. Everything looks right for him. Putting the ball in his hands, oh my God, the decisions, the quickness, and suddenly the shooting. It's going to be so much better, in my opinion, having this guy make quick decisions for you, because honestly, that's the reason why most teams can't play fast. They don't have players who can think that fast. The faster you play, the better you have to be. Skill and pace have to go hand in hand, right? So if you have a team with a really dynamic and very talented, playmaker like Scotty, and who can just grab it and go, I mean, man, you could be down the court before the other team has even recovered, right? All of these advantages are lost when you don't play with the correct pace, right? And suddenly you have players who are very instinctual athletes, right? There's instinct and then there's skill. You want to talk Scotty, it's pure instinct right now. The skill is not there yet. It's going to get there, I'm sure, at some point, but it's not there yet. So all of those instincts, those raw, transition instincts, those quick reads and stuff, you're taking all of that away by not moving the ball properly. I liken it to playing chess, right? When you play chess, you take a grandmaster, you can play 7 games on rapid, no problem. Knows exactly where he is. Why? Because he's a grandmaster. He's gifted at chess. You take an average novice, can't play 1 game in 4 hours. It's the same thing, right? Scotty is a grandmaster when it comes to basketball. He sees everything so quickly. So playing fast is going to absolutely make him better, in my opinion. So I think that playing fast is going to mask some of the perceptive lack of talent offensively that the Raptors have. The defensive versatility, the lineup versatility, the overall like ability to rebound, crash, like you're not going to have a lot of mismatches. You're going to have like a tremendous amount of defensive versatility. You're going to have guys who can switch 1 through 4. All of these things are just things that most teams can't say that they have. I mean, I'm sorry, Milwaukee can't say that they can switch most of their defenders 1 through 5. Dame can't guard a soul. Who are they starting at the 2? Chris Middleton has lost a step. I mean, if you really want to talk about it, it's really I can't think of another team in the league that has the type of defensive upside that the Toronto Raptors have if they push for it, if they commit to that side. Now let's talk about depth. I'm struggling really hard to figure out who the 10 players who play on a night-to-night basis for this team are going to be. It's a really good problem to have, isn't it? I think that the starters, Darko Rakovic has been very non-committal so far about who he's going to start. I think the only debate at this point is really Gary Trent Jr. versus Dennis Schroeder, and I don't think it's going to be much of a debate, but let's assume that roster spot remains wide open, and let's consider it 6 starters, okay? So the 6 starters obviously being Jakob Poeltl, right, at the center, Pascal Siakam at the power forward. You have probably OG Anunoby starting at the 3, right? You have Gary Trent Jr. starting at the 2, Scotty starting at the 1, Dennis Schroeder is your 6th man. Okay, so those are the 6 spots. Now, who are 7, 8, 9, and 10? I'm assuming Grady's going to be there, right? You got to assume Grady's going to be there. You got to assume that Precious is going to be there, right? Those are 2 young players that you really believe in. You got to assume Otto's going to be there if he's healthy. We're at 9. We're at 8. Are we at 8? We're at 8. We're at 9. No, we're at 9. So now you have Chris Boucher, right? You have Chris Boucher, Thaddeus Young, Jalen McDaniels. You have actual options extending down to 11 and 12. And I realize that a lot of people are pretty sour on Thaddeus Young right now because he didn't play a lot of games last year and all that stuff. But he's still like a guy, at the end of a rotation. I'm pretty sure there's like at least 15 teams in the league where if you put him on their team, he would grab some amount of minutes. He's not totally washed. I'm not suggesting he should be a major rotation guy. I'm not saying he should be in your top 9, top 10, but I'm saying in case of emergency, this is not a guy that you would count as a scrub. So you have some actual options here. So the depth is actually in a good place, in my opinion. I haven't even talked about Christian Koloko. I haven't talked about Malachi Flynn. I haven't talked about Jeff Doughton. There's some serious talent between spots 10 and 13 on this team, which is not something that genuinely you could say for the last few years, regardless of how high you are on Delano Banton or Juancho Hernan Gomez or whatever. Like none of those guys, in my opinion, are as good as someone like an Otto Porter, so just getting him back is just making such a big difference. And I really do think he could be a big difference maker. Now let's talk about another reason why I am like genuinely very optimistic about this team, and that is the shooting. Now, I think a lot has been made of the Raptors being non-shooters. They have non-shooters. They play a lot of non-shooters. I think partially this is because Siakam and Barnes struggle from 3. Jakob Poeltl doesn't shoot 3s, and they're all expected to play in the same lineup. And so the question then becomes is like, okay, like you can't shoot. Well, there are a lot of teams out there that play guys who can't shoot that shoot really well. Boston Celtics shot really, really well last year. Robert Williams played. Not exactly a great 3-point shooter. Derek White, not exactly a great 3-point shooter. Marcus Smart, not exactly a great 3-point shooter. My point is, you can get away with non-shooters as long as you're generating really good 3s, which is to say you're generating really great shots. This is not like college. This is not like college at all, where you have like one 3-point shooter, like a JJ Redick or a Grady Dick, and everyone can just gang up on that guy. And if you don't have other talent, no, man, there's a lot of talent on this team. You can push the paint. Damian Lillard was talking about it. It's like, you're going to have to pick your poison with Giannis and me, right? You're going to have to either pack the paint and you're going to let me get 9 threes, or you're going to stress out and throw doubles at me, and Giannis is just going to get open dunks. I get that. Now, I'm not saying the Raptors have a Damian Lillard or a Giannis Antetokounmpo. Either one of those guys will be the best player on the Raptors, bar none. So why am I optimistic about the Toronto Raptors if there are 3 teams in the Eastern Conference that have multiple players who are better than Pascal Siakam. I'm optimistic because I think by committee, once again, you can actually generate decent looks. You consider lineups with guys like Scotty, Pascal, Jakob, right? And you're like, okay, well, you're going to really, really struggle shooting threes with that lineup. Seems a very basic way of thinking, right? Scotty and Jakob and OG are incredible screeners. Screening and three-point shooting are so linked. Pace and three-point shooting are so linked that even if you had 2 very capable three-point shooters on the court, that you could probably generate cleaner looks for those three-point shooters than you could have last year. Because at the end of the day, when you're shooting a 3, it's not like you can't take a 2. I think that's the best way to look at this. I know it may sound like I'm, like simplifying things a little bit too much and like I'm stupid, but I promise it's true. Nobody is playing this type of offense where 5 guys stand on the outside and just pass the ball around like hot potato and then take a 3. Like it seems sometimes when I'm listening to analysts talk about basketball, that's how they think basketball is played. That's just not how it's played. It's never been how it's played. Kevon Looney has been part of incredible three-point shooting lineups. He doesn't take a single 3. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if Scotty and Pascal can just take the ones that the offense is generating, and OG, Gary, Grady, Otto, these guys, they can hit an above average clip, and your pace picks up properly, and your movement and your screening is elite, and you're like really hunting. And I mean, there's something about rhythm too, like when you have a rhythm where the ball is moving and it actually hums and it finds the guy, you're getting easier looks, you're getting cleaner looks, you're getting open looks, you're getting earlier looks in the offense. It's a really important part of basketball. And I just don't understand why people often assume that it's just, okay, well, this guy's not a three-point shooter, so you're going to be a bad team. Also, Pascal Siakam is not a bad three-point shooter. He's not a great three-point shooter. He's not a league average three-point shooter, but he is not a bad three-point shooter at all. So let's stop talking about him like he's a non-three-point shooter. I also think that Scotty has made some really promising, albeit sometimes shaky, progress with his jumper. I still see bad habits emerging, but I see such a progression over the last 3 years that to get him even up to 31 to 32% this year, I think could make this competent. Ken, thank you so much, man. That's awesome. Thank you so much for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Okay. Toronto 416 saying we should have kept Champagny. I'm in agreement, but you know what? I am really liking Javon Freeman Liberty, man. I really do. I mean, if I had to go down this roster, if there's any players that I would be like, man, I don't know about that, probably Malachi Flynn at this point. Malachi Flynn, I'm just like a little bit wishy-washy on. But other than that, I mean, I'm good, man. I like this team. I like this team top to bottom. I think the vibe's been great. I think, there's a lot of sense to how this roster has been constructed. And look, it's so hard to judge last year's team the way that it was constructed and the way they played, right? They were constructed to play fast. They were constructed to be switchable. They were constructed to have big playmakers. They were constructed with this idea that Fred would play off the ball. And somewhere in the middle of the season, it just all went to shit, and nothing that was planned ended up being that way. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine like another coach? Like I can't remember a situation in NBA history where things went quite like this. I mean, there are definitely, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Dylan asking, do you think Barnes will play bully ball more often this season and get to the free throw line? I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he's huge. Like my girlfriend was looking at, some of the Raptors footage. My friend was shooting like some of the Raptors footage last night from Vancouver, and he sent me like some stuff of like the Raptors clowning around. And she looked over at Scotty, and she was just like, "Oh my God!" Like his arms are bigger than my head, and I was just like, "Yeah, he's huge." Like he looks visibly like he's standing next to Precious, he's standing next to Siakam, he's standing next to OG. He is visibly wider than those guys. Like there might be centers that are going to get absolutely bully balled by him. There's not it's going to be really, and he looks bursty. He doesn't look slowed down at all. So it's not like, okay, he's 240 now. I mean, I think 240 is a very reasonable weight. I mean, LeBron's played at 235. Scotty's just a little bit taller than LeBron. Like, I think it's a pretty reasonable weight. It's body to body. It's body to body. Some people have heavier bones, etc. But I think he's at a good playing weight for himself. He doesn't look bulky. It just looks really strong. Like, he looks insanely strong, and he looks quicker somehow. So Sir Koze. Hey Rob, hope you're having a good evening. What minor role player would you want to add to our roster if you could, and why? Jeez. Minor role player. I mean, it's hard, right? Because this team is pretty deep. Like, I'm not sure who's not going to play for you at this point. If I could probably do one thing, it would be to consolidate Chris Boucher and Malachi Flynn probably into a really good stretch shooting big. Like, that would be like, because Chris Boucher is technically a stretch big, but he often struggles guarding the post. So I think someone like, and I know that he's not a minor role playing big or anything like that. He would probably be either a starter or like a key bench player for you at this point. But Brooke Lopez, someone like that, someone of that ilk where he can space the floor and he can, and Burke is not the only one. He's just a very notable example of it, but there are other players of that, type out there. I think that would just really work well to invert the offense. Darko Rajakovic has talked a lot about switching 1 through 4 on offense. I really like this, largely because it makes your offense very unpredictable. If they're talking about getting Grady, OG, Scotty, Dennis Schroeder, Pascal Siakam, they're talking about getting all of these guys reps on the ball, a high pick and roll, and then someone cutting backside, and then someone's like, there's just so many interchangeable pieces on this team that it's like you could have Scotty start with the ball at the top of the key. Jakob could set a pick for him. It could roll off into OG taking a corner 3, or OG can get the ball, reinitiate the whole thing. Jakob flows to the top of the key, and then Barnes is setting the pick for the guy. It's just there's such a wide. I think screen setting is so freaking underrated, first of all, and I'm just excited about the potential of having a Scotty, OG, Scotty, OG, and Jakob Poeltl in the same freaking lineup. Like, can you just imagine like how open Gary, Grady, Dennis Schroeder, these guys are going to be? I don't think they've ever been this open in their lives, right? So this is such a unique and interesting thing, right? That the Raptors have, like playing earlier in the clock, potentially, all the cross matching could open up a world of offensive rebounds. Like, I realized that Nick Nurse's whole preaching philosophy last year was to win the battle of possessions. I don't see any reason for that to stop. But what I do think is that as they continue to play to their strengths, I think there's so many things the Darko system can do to mask some of the weaknesses that we saw last year. So, no, I don't think so at all. See, I think Pascal Siakam is a very good player. Like, he's a really good player. And I mean, he could be extremely unstoppable if he plays within the offense. I think something that people don't realize about Michael Jordan, and this is something you don't really realize unless you watched him play or you've really gone back and studied tape on him. Almost everything Jordan did was within the offense. Has anyone else noticed that? Like, I feel like I'm going crazy when I talk to people about Michael Jordan, and they talk about this very ball dominant, get out of my way, hijack the offense type of guy, like he's James Harden or Luka Doncic. He wasn't like that at all. He played so within the flow of the offense. The triangle offense was generating all sorts of looks for him. He could have scored so much more. It wasn't quite Kobe at all. Kobe in 05, 06, when he went on that crazy scoring tear. It wasn't like that at all. Like, Michael Jordan did a lot of his damage in the flow of the offense. He was extremely efficient. Pascal Siakam can get way more efficient. Like, I think he was at what, 56% true shooting last year? League average is 58. He could be at 60 so easily 60, 62 maybe. He could push it 60 to 62. That would be the barometer for a great Pascal Siakam season for me. Defense and efficiency. That's it. Where he gets his shots from, honestly, I mean, this is a very talented player. He can break you down off the bounce. He could definitely do a lot of stuff in the corners. I think above the break threes are going to be a really big thing for all three, actually. Darko Rakovic talked about, challenging OG to push himself out of the corners a little bit and move himself more to above the break. I think this will be very important because I think Scotty has proven to be a better shooter from the corners than the top. So if you could have OG, who is definitely the better shooter between the two, relocate more to the top, then that opens up at least one corner for Siakam and one corner for Scotty, places where both of them have actually shown to be competent. I don't know. I think it'll be on OG to do that a little bit more. And I think let's see what rank pro. Do you believe roles will become more defined? Yes. I no, actually, sorry. I think roles were very defined last year, to be completely honest with you. It was very clear that Fred was the leader, Siakam was the top dog, and I think that may have rubbed some people the wrong way. Scotty's talked about, it's being draining. And granted, it wasn't in exactly that context of, roles, but it was just the structure, the very rigid structure of, Fred is going to be the decider of the offense and, you're going to set picks for him. And generally speaking, I think you want to have, you certainly want to have, a defined set of things that you're supposed to do for your role players. Like, you want to have Chris Boucher and you say, okay, well, I want you to come in and block everything you can, or, get me 2 offensive rebounds, and that's your role. And that was there last season. And you want Grady to be like, okay, I want you to get in the game and I want you to take 3 threes. Every time you get into the game, no matter come hell or high water, I want you to get 3 threes off and I want you to execute one pick and roll. That's your role. Precious Achiuwa, I want you to get 2 loose balls. I want you to get out on the break. I want you to crash the glass, get me 1 offensive rebound for every sting you're in. Boom. This is simple execution. This was all there last year. I think what wasn't there last year was the appropriate assignment of who was who within the offense. And I think certain guys maybe have felt that their role was not correct. So I think more so than having roles becoming more defined, I think roles will be better explained and accepted. Because, I've come to learn a lot about Darko Rakovic, the Raptors head coach. Right from when he was hired, I immediately messaged my sister. My sister is known to him, and then, her husband and people that he's played with. And then there are people that I know in the media and ex-Yugoslavia, like from Croatia to Serbia, and they've known him through the years. And one thing you just keep getting back, and it's very consistent. These people that I'm asking don't know each other necessarily, but you're getting the same story back from this guy. Very, very humble, approachable. He accepts his mistakes. He explains himself very well. He holds himself super accountable. He's extremely relatable. He's very detail oriented. He's extremely collaborative. He doesn't really have an ego. He'll allow other people to kind of stand up above him. So this attitude and this it allows for people to accept tough pills, I think, a little bit more easily because they feel like whoever's explaining it to them at least tried, has their back, is being fair. I wonder if at some point last year it crossed some of the players on this team's minds that what was happening wasn't fair with the offense, that, there were opportunities that were being given that weren't necessarily being warranted or earned. And I think as long as Darko Rakovic realizes that, there is a political element to this, and he does, he totally does, he'll be fine. And I think that, he's also clearly aware that one, he's a very smart person. Like, he's not putting people in positions to fail. Um, yeah, I think the roles will be better accepted. I think that would be my way of looking at it. For NBA Jam 2K23 edition, would your Raptors duo be Scotty and Precious? Is there an NBA Jam 2K23? Is this a thing? Like, from my childhood, you're talking the NBA Jam with like Karl Malone and John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek. You talking about that? Is this real? Um, this might surprise some people. It would probably be Scotty and Pascal, or probably Scotty and OG. Maybe Scotty and Gary. It definitely would not be Scotty and Precious. I'll tell you that much right now. This team is better team than last year's team. I agree. You know what? This is a good point. This is a really good point. Dennis Schroeder is adept at throwing lobs. Scotty throws lobs. You have these like more dynamic playmakers. And I know I touched on it earlier, but I just think, look, when I compare the advanced stats between Dennis Schroeder and Fred VanVleet, it looks like I'm looking at one player who's a superstar and one player who's a scrub. It's just not going to look like that this season. I promise you. It's just not going to look like that. There's just so much that you can do to manipulate someone's advanced stats when it comes to optimizing an offense around them. I think Fred VanVleet is a very good starting point guard, and I think Dennis Schroeder is a slightly below average starting point guard. The gap between them, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Let me talk in terms of 2K ratings since we're on the subject. It's like an 82 versus a 78. It's not that big, but the analytics would tell you it's like a 90 versus a 60, and it's not that big. So that's where I think, look, I spent most of last season telling you this offense sucked, that it wasn't going to work, that, players were being squeezed out, that things were selfish, that blah, 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 blah. I got a lot of flack for it. And I'm fine with that. And I had a lot of people, kind of saying like, why can't you just be happy? And, things are, the Raptors just won. And I'm like, but they won in the stupidest way. They're beating nobody. They're beating nobody good. And I felt like, if they made the playoffs last year, maybe, we would have gotten a chance to see what this elite, 5-man unit that's winning all this plus minus battles could have done in the playoffs. But I suspect that it probably would have been more of the same. The roster holes were similar. Depth was an issue all year. I just think that, when you can play faster, you have more depth, you have, better pacing. There's just so many things that are now available to the Raptors. And whether it looks like it on paper or not, I expect this team to be so much better. And perhaps most importantly, from the fan experience, I expect this team to be so much more enjoyable to watch. That's something that I think, I was very proud of Masai Ujiri for saying that, because there isn't another general manager or president who just came out last year and just said, my team is not fun to watch. He said it. He said this team was not fun to watch. And I said, amen. Amen. Thank you for saying it, right? Jet saying, rest in peace, our friend Robert Cormier. Is this Malachi's year? Yes, indeed. Rest in peace, Robert Cormier. My friend Rob passed away last year around this time. It was about a week and a half ago, a year ago. So yeah, so rest in peace to him. Is this Malachi's year? I don't think so. But I'll be really happy, man. That would be amazing, because I'm not even talking about him right now. I think it's just going to be tough for him to crack the rotation. I posted on Instagram that if Jeff Doughton does not make the team, I'm going to start a riot. I mean it. Probably a very quiet riot, but it's going to be a riot nonetheless. I'm looking at Malachi as like a combo guard, potentially like a specialist type of shooter. His shooting has been shaky as hell. But this is year 4 for him. The Raptors continue to believe in him, apparently. Or, he doesn't have a lot of value in trades, but this is a make or break season for him. He knows that. People talk about expiring contracts on the Raptors. They talk about Gary. They talk about Scotty. They talk about Gary, OG, Pascal. Guess who else is a free agent at the end of the season? It's Malachi, right? Like his deal is up, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? Like it's 4 years, deal's up. So it's a bit of a make or break season for him. I don't necessarily see the role, the opportunity. I also don't see the fit. I mean, he's an okay defender, but he's the smallest player on this team, bar none. Like by a large, large margin, he is the smallest player on this team. Like Dennis Schroeder is small, but he is long as shit. I think he's like 6'7" wingspan. Jeff Doughton's pretty decent wingspan. Javon Freeman Liberty, I forgot about Marquise Noel. So I mean, in terms of like the main rotation guys, he's like the smallest guy. I don't see a reason to play someone that small when you have, players who are bigger and better than him across the board. But, you know, um, stranger things have happened. It'd be a really great thing for him to have a bit of a pop. I just don't know if he's going to have the opportunity. I He can hoop. Yeah, man. Like, I mean, he can, like, but we talking like playground, we talking rec basketball, we talking Drew League, like, are we talking organized 5-on-5? Because in the organized 5-on-5 setting, I tell you, there's a lot to make up with him too, right? Like, especially if the advantage of your roster is versatility and positional versatility, playing 1 through 4 interchangeable, like that's not necessarily going to be possible with him. It is, however, possible with Grady Dick. It is also to some extent like if I got cross matched with Malachi on a big wing, I'm sending a double because that's curtains on somebody. If I get cross matched with Dennis Schroeder on a big wing, I might trust him to just with his veteran savvy and his long arms to be able to at least hold water or maybe send a soft double. So I think that's the difference. And I think, with someone like Grady, I think, at least in the future when he's a little bit stronger, I think he could be that too. Um I may have asked this before. If you see us maybe getting a Scotty and OG backcourt, who do you see as their best matchup in the NBA? I'm not sure about this question. I don't know exactly what you mean, like their best matchup in the NBA. Like what's the best backcourt that they could go up against? I mean, ideally, it'd be a small backcourt, right? That they could just shoot over and score over. I just think, when you think about a lineup, especially if Gary is the smallest player on the court for your starting lineup and your starting lineup plays any considerable amount of time together, I mean, who's guarding Scotty in this matchup? Like, if you have a team that's willing to move the ball to find the right matchup, right? Tell me how a Portland, team, with Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons in the backcourt. Tell me how a Damian Lillard led Bucks with Pat Connaughton and Damian Lillard in the back, or even Marjon Beauchamp, whoever they're playing at the two. Tell me how a team like that, tell me how most teams are supposed to deal with that level of size if the ball is moving to find the mismatch, right? Now, therein lies the earlier point that I made about 3-point shots being more open. If you're willing to find the mismatch and you're willing to force a double, and it's not all Pascal Siakam dribble, 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 surveys the floor, Fred VanVleet runs pick and roll with Jakob Poeltl as everyone else stands around, watches being totally underutilized within the offense. But if you're really willing to prod for it, and you get OG, cross matched on Chris Paul in the post, and you're willing to throw it down, someone's got to be open, or OG's just going to have to be like going to work on Chris Paul, right? There just aren't many teams, if any teams. There are no teams in the league that I can think of other than the Boston Celtics that are currently designed to match up with a Barnes at point version of the Toronto Raptors. It's just not going to happen. Now, on the other side, will the Raptors potentially also struggle? Well, a little bit, but not nearly as much as the other teams are going to struggle. I'll be honest, Flynn is the type of guy I see on the Spurs with pop. Sure. I mean, if history is any indication, we're probably going to make another trade with the Spurs this season. Can we get our pick back? That would be just absolutely great. SG, how good is Grady? What prospect in recent years is he comparable to? I think the obvious, the obvious one is, people often say Tyler Hero. I don't necessarily know if I see that. Some people said Christian Brown last year. I definitely don't see that. Um, it's weird, right? With white shooters, sometimes you have a particular bias towards them where you almost want to compare them to a bunch of other white shooters. So the first thought was like, okay, well, maybe he's like Mike Miller, like, or maybe he's like JJ Redick. He's not like any of those guys. I was pleasantly surprised. The more I dug into him this summer, the more I saw, Jesus Christ, someone saying Doug McDermott. Y'all, you better be kidding me. No. Um, no, he's got a little bit more of a flair to his game. I was more impressed with his passing, his ball handling, his overall read and react, his ability to run pick and roll, his ability as potentially a big playmaker as well. He's certainly got more playmaking chops at the same age than Gary Trent Jr. had, and again, like I expect him to be a little bit lost on defense, but he has the size, you can be a defensive liability at 6'8" with a 7-foot-ish, or what was his wingspan? 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", 6'10"-ish wingspan. You can be a defensive liability, but it's hard. It's hard to be a defensive liability if you're actually trying at that size. So, if in the future, like he and Scotty are your backcourt of the future, wow, right? Him, Scotty, OG, that's your 1, 2, 3. If that ever comes to fruition, it's one of the biggest teams in NBA history, right? I was actually thinking of this particular lineup that the Raptors could run out. It's Scotty at the 1, OG at the 2, Jalen McDaniels at the 3. So you get your two shooters, right? Jalen McDaniels and OG are good shooters, like if not great shooters. Yeah, Precious at the 4 and then Jakob at the 5. Now, probably people are thinking immediately spacing is atrocious, but I would tell you that I was struggling in my mind to find an offensive rebounding lineup in NBA history that would be better than that team. Precious is beastly as a rebounder. Jakob Poeltl is a very good rebounder. Scotty Barnes is a very good rebounder. And then OG and Jalen McDaniels, I don't know how another team is going to get a rebound all game. So I would really like to see that lineup at some point. And then I started, swapping players. They'd be like, okay, well, let's take Jakob out and let's put Otto in. You're still a really good rebounding team, but suddenly you got 3-point shooting for days, right? Imagine that lineup of Scotty, OG. Okay, imagine this lineup. Here's a lineup. Try this on for size. Scotty, Gary, OG, right? So there's your 1, 2, 3. And Pascal and Otto, right? Or even Precious and Otto, or Precious and Pascal. Guess what? Every single lineup that I actually named right now is something that is completely within the realm of possibilities for this team. Lineup versatility has me very geeky. Like I get very excited by the concept of disruption, like disrupting other teams. Every team in the league is used to playing the same sets. They're used to playing similar, style. When you can disrupt it, I think we learned this with Nick Nurse really well. And this is the one thing I'll give Nick Nurse a lot of kudos for. He was a massive shit disturber when it came to disrupting rhythm on other teams. When you start to disrupt the rhythm of another team in terms of like the day-to-day minutia, in the playoffs, yeah, they'll probably, catch up to you. But in the regular season where teams aren't practicing and you're the one-off team that's running out these weirdo lineups and everyone has to change their entire defensive scheme, their box out, it's a very good problem to have. So I'm traumatized from last season playing no true center. What would you consider Christian Coloco? And positions, right? Like what is a true center? Christian Coloco is definitely a pure center. Jakob Poeltl is definitely a pure center. Kem Birch is definitely a pure center at this point. I mean, you can call him a 4 or 5 hybrid, but he's a 5. I don't understand that. Probably. Bench looks more promising this year. If OG leaves, does McDaniel step up? Where is this where if OG leaves stuff coming from? Like leaves where? Leaves how? Are you talking leaves next year? I mean, no. These are not comparable players. I just think Like, where's OG going? Like, I think he stays, man. He wants to be here. Like, if the concept is just money and the fact that the Raptors can't offer enough of an extension right now, I'm sure they'll get a deal done next summer. He is not, I want to say touch wood on this because you never know, right? I don't know OG Anunoby personally, but I don't think I'm at all worried about OG Anunoby leaving the Raptors. It's not on my mind. I don't know if it's on your mind, but it's not on my mind at all. For me, he's a Raptor for life. Like, I expect OG Anunoby to retire a Raptor. Um, Also, you have solid internal competition. There was no doubt in my mind who the starting five were going to be last year, or like at the very least, the four players who did start last year plus Christian Coloco. It was not really much of a doubt who was going to start last year. This internal competition of Dennis Schroeder kind of coming in as Darko's, pet favorite and OKC vibes and connection and whatever. How much pressure does this put on Scotty and Gary? I mean, I'm not suggesting that Scotty's ever going to go to the bench, but like at least it puts a lot of pressure on Gary that there is a guy who could literally start in my place, who this coach is super tight with. I also think it would be a really massive integrity move, kind of like a 4D chess move, to have Dennis Schroeder kind of coming off the bench, knowing that he has such a great relationship with Darko. He came here for Darko, all this stuff. I don't know if this has already even worked out between these two. You're going to come off the bench, but I'm going to talk a lot about how much I love you. And, suddenly everyone's going to be like, this coach is super duper duper freaking fair because, he has this long standing existing relationship with this guy and he's still not starting him over Gary Trent Jr. I don't know. But I will tell you this. I saw a coach play favorites last year with his personal favorites, and I saw a team kind of catch on to that. I don't want to see that ever again. Facts. So this is the thing. I'm not concerned at all about turnovers. I'm really not. Number one, when you're a bigger team and you're longer athletes, your transition defense is probably a lot better. The same issue that I talked about for the other team trying to cross match with the Toronto Raptors in transition and potentially having a 6-foot guard or a 6'2" liability stuck on a Scotty or OG as they sealed in the post and quickly put up for a layup. This same issue does not occur for the Toronto Raptors, who have positional versatility. So playing fast is never going to hurt you if you're the Toronto Raptors. Number one, your transition defense is great if you do happen to turn the ball over. Number two, you are the team that actually benefits from cross-matching the most, probably in the entire NBA. So there's never going to be a reason to play slow if you're the Toronto Raptors, unless, of course, this particular coach decides that he wants to tailor the offense for Thaddeus Young. That's my little jab at Nick Nurse. This would be like, this would be like if New Orleans this year, they were just like, I know we got Brandon Ingram and I know we got Zion and I know we got CJ, but we're going to tailor our entire offense around Jose Alvarado. We're going to do everything to make sure Jose Alvarado is playing at the right pace for him. Teams don't do this. I've never seen a team cater their entire offense to a role player. It's just the stupidest thing I think I've ever seen. It's what made last year so frustrating. It's why I'm so happy this season, because I know I'm not going to have to watch that shit ever again. It's just great. It's just great. I don't know. I got nothing more to say. It's just, I feel good, man. Like, I feel good. First of all, like, I mean, I'm watching the Toronto media sort of lose their mind collectively over how will this team recover without Fred VanVleet. And how, like, in Waterboy, when he's asking him about like why alligators are so angry, and Adam Sandler goes, Adam, alligators are angry because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush. Mama said, and then Colonel Sanders goes, "Well, Mama's wrong again." Well, the Toronto media is wrong again. I suspect very much that, if the Raptors are expected to win 33, 34, 36, 37 wins, I mean, I saw a freaking projection by someone that I used to respect that said the Pistons would finish ahead of the Raptors. And I mean, I get it. Monty is a really, I mean, he's an upgrade, but like at some point you do have to have players who know how to win. And this takes time. There's such a fundamental misunderstanding between, for most analysts, not saying all analysts, some analysts do get it. Well, where do wins come from? Wins come from players like Otto Porter Jr. and Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes and OG and OG. These are all winning players. You have all winning players on this team. I can think of maybe two players that I would not classify as specifically winning players. Like they all have winning habits. They make winning plays. They play two ways. Like you just can't have, 12, 11 guys on a roster like this that have NBA experience and that have and you have a coach that is tailoring an offense to make them better and then come back and say, well, they're going to be worse than last year. That makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. It's just very silly. Willie reported Larry Tannenbaum next year and Ed Rogers is taking over more. He's known to be cheap. He said no to NBA expansion for only $50 million. Will he be frugal to extend the three guys? I mean, Larry Tannenbaum is still, there. He'll still have, some overall stake. And I mean, Rogers has always been like the boss. Rogers and Bell have always been able to kind of have the final say on, tax and stuff. But, as far as I've always understood, when they want to go over the tax, all they have to do is ask. Okay. That's from what I've heard. They went over the tax, for the championship team because they thought they had a chance. I expect they'll do the same. Business is going really well. Business is going really well. They understand that. I think it should be fine. But yes, I obviously don't like hearing that there will be less Larry Tannenbaum in any situation because he's obviously been like a lifer for the Raptors and just a really big voice of support for Masai Ujiri. Actually, no. So it's funny. Like as Raptor fans, we often listen to this media and we listen to Alex Wong and Will Liu and so. And we listen to some of these idiotic questions that these guys have sometimes. And I mean, I got to tell you, I've been listening to the Toronto media for a very long time. This might be the best iteration of the Toronto media that I've ever seen in my life. Is that saying a lot? I mean, that's not probably saying a lot. But I mean, at the very least, you get a couple of thoughtful questions from Samson. You get a couple of thoughtful questions from Oren every now and again. Will Liu has really done a lot to upgrade his basketball acumen. Amit Mann is like he's gotten so much better. I mean, I realize he's not often in these pressers. So really at this point, your dumb questions are pretty much coming from two directions. And I don't need to tell you who those two directions are. But I mean, God damn it, Eric Kareen, he's awesome, man. I like Eric Kareen a lot. I don't know how you guys feel, but I like him, like Murphy's pretty decent. Like, I mean, shit. Like, I don't think the Toronto media is that bad at all. I mean, you want to hear something bad? Go listen to the LA Clippers media grilling Kawhi Leonard and whether he loves basketball. That's embarrassing. That was embarrassing. Yeah. Did I listen to Will's interview with OG? Was this on the Raptors show? I think I heard a little bit of it. Nothing stuck out to me. If you're going to tell me it was really bad, I mean, Grange and Lewinberg. I mean, yeah, that's two of them for sure. But I think there's this little. Don't be mean, Rob. There's an old man by the name of Doug Smith who often holds a recorder up to players' faces and asks them weird questions. And I think that probably he is the scourge of Toronto media and has been, quite frankly, for 20 plus years. Talked to a lot of players who just absolutely cannot stand that dude. I don't understand how he still has a job. But he has a job. So, I mean, whatever. I mean, does anyone listen to the Toronto Star? Like, let me know. Do you listen? Do you read the Toronto Star? Has anyone read Doug Smith's work in 20 years? I certainly haven't. So, I mean, who cares, right? It doesn't matter. My point is, you listen to other media talk. It's a lot of the same stuff, right? It's, hey, the fans were wondering about this. And I mean, what are you expecting? Like expecting some serious discourse and some serious it just doesn't happen very often, right? I think the Toronto media has gotten a lot better, though. I will tell you, I mean, there used to be 7 Doug Smiths, right? Now there's just 1 or 2. So it's, it's getting better. Hopefully, at some point, Josh Lewinberg kind of gets over the fact that Fred VanVleet is gone. He seemed very, very sad on TSN. about the Raptors prospects. There's all these old, sort of lazy, like Scotty Barnes wasn't in good condition. Let me just put this way, okay? Just to address this, because I don't want to turn this, and I promise you, I'm not going to turn this channel into a Scotty defense brigade again, because I did that all last year, and it's very annoying and, quite frankly, kind of depressing. But I do want to say this. It's a very good thing for someone to hold themselves accountable. This is something that I kind of criticized Pascal Siakam for at the opening day presser, at the media day, where he couldn't even accept that, yes, at times last year he became too ball dominant. He was just like, I've never been a selfish player in my life. We should probably celebrate people who accept their mistakes so that it encourages more people to own up to their mistakes. Instead, what do? We ask Scotty at the end of the year presser, when they're doing the locker cleanouts, what do you want to do next year? And he candidly, because this, big-hearted goof decides to be honest with vultures, he says, I need to up my conditioning. I need to up my conditioning. And whether he knew what he was doing or not, and I'm sure he didn't because he was just answering it honestly, I know exactly what he was saying. The way he plays, the role that he had, the defensive versatility, playing more on the ball, 82 games a season, he clearly plays hurt a lot. That's taxing. But I mean, you can't tell me that this was evidence that he came in out of shape. This is such a twisting of narratives, and it's so stupid. And it's inherently irresponsible. And everyone has just gone with this. Everyone has just gone with this. Scotty needs to work on his conditioning because Scotty said he needed to work on his conditioning. I just want to say this as a person who played basketball and someone who's in pretty decent shape. I'm not saying I could run like a marathon or anything, but I'm in better shape than pretty much every single person who does Toronto media. I'll tell you that. If these people who are talking about Scotty needing to be in better shape had to play 1 minute in his shoes, they would die on the basketball court quite easily. Like probably dead within 2 minutes, open heart surgery 3 minutes, like completely, funeral 4 minutes, like they would be dead. So this notion of, talking about someone's conditioning when they're in 1,000 times better shape than you, and probably, they are in the 98th to 97th percentile of all NBA athletes. I mean, frame it into your mind, at 21, Scotty Barnes, 21 years old. There are very few 21-year-olds who can play 82 games. There are very few, very few. It's like we're talking 10, 12 people in the whole world of people who play basketball in that age group, which is millions and millions of people. So really, when we start talking about Scotty Barnes in the same breath, like your wife who needs to lose 10 pounds, like please don't talk about it that way. And, it's so... It's just the stupidity of it. You know what I mean? He was never in bad shape. He's been one of the best in shape athletes ever. Like, I mean, you ever see like a rookie, as they say, the rookie wall, the rookie wall, the rookie wall. I mean, this is a dude who steamrolled through his first year. He was in incredible shape, man. Second in the NBA in distance traveled, most complex role on defense. And the idea that he's being called instead of, and then this is the spin, this is the stupidity, and this is the toxicity. You should celebrate a dude who's in incredible shape for saying he needs to get into better shape. You should not then vilify him and then suggest that he showed up to last season in bad shape. It's incredibly stupid. Anyways, that's what I wanted to say. I can't wait to watch him shut these people up, man. I tell you, it's very petty. It's a little bit petty of me, but he's my favorite player. And I told a lot of people, I can't wait. I can't wait for this guy to start dropping like 20 and 15 on the regular. And then suddenly, I'm just curious what they're going to say. I'm curious what they're going to say. Here's what I hope they don't say. I hope they don't say that, oh, yeah, we were really hard on him last year and it really motivated him. I promise you, he didn't read. He didn't read any of it. The only person who was really, really bothered by it was me. Like, it's just funny. I have a feeling it's going to be a really big year for him. I do. I think this offense is going to unlock him. He seems different. Anyone notice that? Like all the interviews he's done this summer, he feels like a completely different dude. Feels like a completely different dude. The way he talks, the way he's carrying himself, the way he's moving around. I still think the jump shot is a work in progress for sure. I'm not expecting him to come out and shoot 36, 37% or something like that from three. It's going to be a work in progress for sure. But he has a lot of ways to score. He's, as long as his touch around the basket is good, he continues to stay assertive. He talked about attacking for four quarters. He talked about it last year. It was like, hey man, like I did it in spurts. We saw it in spurts, but I need to do it for the full game. If he gets that in his head, yeah, you could see a couple of 40-point games, and then suddenly, people are really shutting up, right? What are they going to say now? Anyways, no calls today, which is great too. That's cool. I was happy to just talk, get some things off my chest, and just I'm excited. I'm excited for preseason action. I'm actually on a film shoot on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Thankfully, though, Sunday is our lightest day, so hopefully I'm back home by 7 o'clock because we have an early start. So 7 o'clock, I'll be back at home. 8 o'clock's the game. 10, 10:30, whatever, y'all get a live. All right. We'll do our first post-game live for the preseason. Can't wait for that. Hopefully we're talking about, man, I hope Scotty doesn't troll us and come out with like 2 points and 13 assists or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's preseason. It's going to take it with a grain of salt, whether it's great, whether it's bad, whatever, it's preseason. But I do expect, within the first month of the season, you should see the jump. Like you usually do. You usually do see it. Like when guys have kind of worked really hard in the summer, you usually see that sort of notable gap up. So I'm expecting to see that. And, I think one of the surprises this year could be OG. I really do. I think his ball handling, confidence overall, and I know we've been through this a couple of times with him, and it's like hurt me once, shame on you, hurt me twice, shame on me, that sort of disappoint me, fool me once stuff. But you never know when it's going to click for guys. He's still 25, 26 years old. It could just be a delayed thing with him. He suffered through a lot of injuries, so I wouldn't be surprised if he could take on a more dynamic role on offense and just be a little bit more effective. I think with OG, just like with Otto, just like with Scotty, it's just going to come down to health. I think it's going to come down to health for all three of those guys. And if those three guys stay healthy and Pascal Siakam buys in, I think all of these people predicting 33, 37, 34 wins are going to look really, really dumb in a few months. All right. Talk to y'all later. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and like this video on your way out. Thank you so much to everyone for all the super generous super chats. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Cheers, guys.